It was just another Tuesday morning when everything changed. Miho sat in his small apartment in Seoul, sipping his third cup of coffee and scrolling through the news feeds. Then his screen went white. Every device in his building, every device on Earth, lit up simultaneously with the same message. The Galactic Council wanted to talk. Within minutes, the transmission was everywhere. 17 different languages all saying the same thing. Humanity was being invited to join the galactic community. After 30 years of cold shoulders, blocked trade routes, and border disputes that occasionally turned violent, the aliens were finally extending a hand of friendship. Miho worked as a junior translator at the United Nations complex in New York. He'd moved there 5 years ago, leaving behind his family's small restaurant business in Busan. Languages had always fascinated him, the way words could build bridges or burn them down. Now he was watching the biggest translation job in human history unfold on his screen. The Xinthian High Mediator appeared in holographic form, tall and elegant with 3 large eyes that blinked in slow, measured patterns. The alien spoke in a melodic voice that the translation software rendered into perfect Korean. "People of Earth," it began, "we come with an offer of peace." Miho leaned forward. Something about the way the Xinthian's middle eye kept flickering bothered him. He'd spent years studying nonverbal communication across species. That flicker meant something. The offer sounded incredible. Too incredible. Humans would get access to technology that could cure diseases, extend lives by centuries, and allow travel between stars in days instead of decades. Educational programs that could teach a child the accumulated knowledge of civilizations thousands of years old. Trade routes that would make Earth wealthy beyond imagination. The price seemed small. Humanity would just need to harmonize their military forces with council oversight. Accept some advisors to help integrate Earth's governments with galactic standards. Simple cooperation for mutual benefit. Everyone wins. By noon, the UN Assembly Hall was packed. Miho stood in the back, holding his tablet and watching the ambassadors file in. He spotted Ambassador Jaiwan Kim immediately. She was legendary in diplomatic circles. A woman who'd negotiated peace treaties on Mars and prevented 3 separate wars in the asteroid belt. She never smiled unless she meant it, and right now her face was stone. The hall erupted in applause as the Xinthian's message played again on the massive screens. Politicians were already drafting speeches about this historic moment. Corporate executives were calculating profit margins. News anchors were preparing their most optimistic talking points about humanity's bright future among the stars. But Miho noticed the people who weren't celebrating. Admiral Taeyong Park sat rigid in the military section, his jaw clenched tight. Dr. Hannah Song from the Xenopsychology Institute was typing furiously on her device, her eyes narrowed. And Ambassador Kim kept staring at the same paragraph of the treaty document, reading it over and over. Miho's own instincts were screaming. He pulled up the full treaty text on his tablet and started reading. The language was dense, full of diplomatic phrases and legal terminology that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. He'd seen this before, contracts that sounded generous on the surface but hid dangerous clauses in the fine print. Then he found it. Buried in Section 47, hidden behind phrases about technical interoperability standards and communication protocol harmonization, was something alarming. The Council wanted access to Earth's quantum communication network. Complete access. The same network that connected every military base, every defense satellite, every command center across human space. Miho's coffee went cold in his hand. He read the clause 3 more times, hoping he'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding. This wasn't about interoperability. This was a backdoor. A way to tap into humanity's entire military infrastructure. He looked up at the celebration around him. People were cheering, embracing, talking about the dawn of a new era. They saw opportunity and hope. But Miho saw something else entirely. He saw a trap being set carefully and methodically by beings who'd done this before. The Galactic Council had spent 3 decades treating humanity like a threat. They'd blocked human expansion, imposed trade sanctions, and responded to every diplomatic overture with suspicion and hostility. And now, suddenly they wanted to be friends? Now they were offering gifts that seemed too good to be true? Miho had grown up listening to his grandmother's stories about the Korean War, about how sweet words could hide bitter intentions. She'd always told him to trust actions, not promises. And the Council's actions over the past 30 years told a very different story than their words today. He caught Ambassador Kim's eye across the hall. She was looking directly at him, and her expression said everything. She'd found the same clause. She knew what it meant. And she knew that most people in this room were too dazzled by the promises to see the danger. The peace accord was being celebrated as humanity's greatest achievement. But Miho was starting to suspect it might be humanity's greatest test. The question wasn't whether they could join the galactic community. The question was whether they could survive the invitation. 3 days after the invitation, Dr. Hannah Song stood before a room full of people who weren't supposed to exist. The Emergency Security Council had been convened in an underground facility beneath Geneva, so deep that most governments didn't acknowledge it was there. The people gathered here had clearances that went beyond top secret. They were the ones who planned for the unthinkable. Hannah pulled up her first holographic display. 17 alien faces appeared, floating in the air above the table. These are the species that no longer exist as independent civilizations, she said quietly. Her voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room lean forward. The Korvathi, the Drell Confederation, the Singing Moons of Arcturus. All of them accepted peace accords almost identical to ours. She changed the display. Charts and timelines filled the air. Within 5 years of signing, each civilization experienced what the Council called governmental restructuring. Their leaders were replaced with Council advisors. Within 10 years, their militaries were absorbed into Council defense forces. Within 15 years, their cultures became museum exhibits. They stopped being civilizations and became historical footnotes. Miho sat in the back row, still not quite believing he'd been called to this meeting. Ambassador Kim had personally requested him after he'd sent her his analysis of the treaty's hidden clauses. Now he was in a room with generals, intelligence directors, and scientists whose work could change the course of human history. So we're not special, General Taeyong said, his voice flat. We're just next in line. Exactly, Hannah replied. She pulled up another image. But here's what makes our situation different. We know what's coming. The Korvathi didn't. The Drell didn't. They trusted the Council's promises until it was too late to resist. Ambassador Kim stood up, her presence commanding immediate attention. Show them the defectors, she said. The room's lighting dimmed as a new hologram appeared. 3 alien figures materialized, looking tired and frightened. These weren't recordings. These were real-time transmissions from a hidden location somewhere in the outer colonies. The first was a Drell engineer named Kathis. His scales were dull and his eyes kept darting around nervously. I worked on Council integration systems for 20 years, he said through a translator. I helped install them on 7 different worlds. The peace accord is not what you think. It's a virus. Miho felt his stomach tighten. Not a computer virus, Kathis continued. A social virus. Every clause is designed to create dependency. First, you accept advisors. They seem helpful, knowledgeable. They offer solutions to problems you didn't know you had. Then you adopt Council communication systems because they're more efficient. Then your governments start deferring to Council expertise because they've been doing this for thousands of years. Before you realize what's happening, your people can't imagine making decisions without Council approval. The second defector, a young Korvathi female named Sarah, spoke next. Her voice trembled. My grandmother remembered when we were free. She told me stories about our world before the Council came. But by the time I was born, those stories seemed like fantasies. Everyone around me believed the Council had saved us, had made us better. The integration was so gradual that most people never noticed we'd lost ourselves. The third defector didn't speak. He just displayed a holographic document, a peace accord identical to Earth's, signed by his people 200 years ago. Then he showed what had followed. Population relocations. Cultural education programs that erased old traditions. Military restructuring that left his people defenseless. Economic integration that made them dependent on Council resources for survival. My species doesn't exist anymore, he said finally. We walk around, we breathe, but we're not who we were. We're Council citizens now. Nothing more. The holograms faded. The lights came back up. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Miho broke the silence. How many people know about this? About what really happens? 17 people in this room, Admiral Kim answered. The President knows. 3 other world leaders know. That's it. If word gets out, panic could destroy us faster than the Council ever could. So what do? Asked Colonel Jisoo, head of Space Defense Command. We can't just reject the accord. The Council's made it clear that would be considered a hostile act. They'll blockade our space, cut off trade with the colonies. Half our asteroid miners depend on Council-approved routes. We'd be strangled within months. Then we don't reject it, Ambassador Kim said calmly. We accept it. The room erupted in protests. Generals and scientists talked over each other, their voices rising in alarm. Kim raised her hand and silence fell again. We accept it, she repeated. But on our terms. We signed their treaty, we welcome their advisors, and we give every appearance of cooperation. And while they think they're integrating us, we prepare for war. Hannah was nodding slowly. The Council expects either submission or defiance. They've seen both responses hundreds of times. But they've never encountered a species that could pretend to submit while planning resistance. It's dangerous, General Taeyong said. If they discover what we're doing, then we're no worse off than if we'd refused from the start, Kim interrupted. But this way we buy time. Time to prepare. Time to find weaknesses in their systems. Time to coordinate with our colonies and build defenses they won't see coming. Miho thought about his grandmother again. She used to say that the best way to defeat a stronger enemy was to let them think they'd already won. Make them comfortable. Make them careless. Then strike when they least expect it. There's something else, Hannah said, pulling up one more display. We've been analyzing Council communication patterns for the past 6 months. There are encrypted data packets hidden in their diplomatic transmissions. We can't decode them yet, but the timing is suspicious. They've been sending more of these packets as the Accord announcement got closer. They're coordinating something, Admiral Kim said. Probably troop movements. Maybe invasion plans. They're not just offering us peace. They're preparing to take us by force if we refuse. The room fell silent again as the weight of that realization sank in. The Council hadn't come to offer humanity a choice. They'd come to present an illusion of choice while preparing to eliminate any possibility of real freedom. So we play their game, Kim said. We smile, we sign, we cooperate. And we prepare for the day when the mask comes off and we show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. 3 months had passed since the Council first made their offer, and humanity still hadn't signed. Every day brought new pressure. Council representatives appeared on news broadcasts with concerned expressions, talking about humanity's isolation and missed opportunities. Trade convoys heading to the outer colonies experienced mysterious delays at Council checkpoints. Scientific collaboration requests were suddenly stuck in endless bureaucratic reviews. The message was clear: sign the accord or suffer the consequences. But behind the scenes, humanity was working faster than ever before. Miho had been reassigned from his translator position to something that didn't officially exist: a special intelligence unit operating out of a converted warehouse in Seoul. His new job was simple in concept, impossible in execution: find out exactly what the Council was planning. Lieutenant Juno sat across from him, eyes bloodshot from 3 days of continuous work. They'd been childhood friends back in Busan before Juno joined the Space Force and Miho went into diplomacy. Now they were reunited in the most unlikely of circumstances, hunting for hidden messages in alien transmissions. Look at this, Juno said, highlighting a section of code on his screen. This is supposed to be a routine diplomatic message about trade regulations. But there's something else buried underneath. See these patterns? Miho leaned closer. At first, it looked like random noise, the kind of static that naturally occurred in quantum communications. But Juno had been running pattern recognition algorithms, and the computers had found something human eyes would have missed. Hidden in the noise were secondary data packets, so small and perfectly encrypted that conventional analysis dismissed them as meaningless interference. How many of these have you found? Miho asked. Thousands. Going back 6 months, maybe longer. They're in every single Council transmission, trade discussions, cultural exchanges, even their entertainment broadcasts. It's like they're using every communication channel to send hidden orders. Over the next week, teams across Earth worked on decoding those packets. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces scattered across 100 different messages. But slowly, fragment by fragment, a picture began to emerge. The packets were military orders, deployment schedules, target assessments, fleet movements. Miho stood in the command center on Luna, watching as analysts assembled the decoded information into a tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. Council ships were repositioning throughout the sector, forming a net around human space. Supply depots were being established at strategic jump points. And most disturbing of all, there were detailed surveys of Earth's major cities, military installations and infrastructure networks. They're preparing for an invasion, Admiral Taeyong said quietly, standing beside him. The old general looked tired but focused. And the timeline matches perfectly with Clause 63 of their accord. Miho pulled up the treaty document on his tablet. Clause 63 granted Council security advisors access to human military installations exactly 90 days after signing. They're not even hiding it, he said. They're planning to walk right through our front door. Only if we let them, the Admiral replied. Ambassador Kim called an emergency meeting of the Shadow Coalition that had formed to resist the Council. Representatives came from everywhere: the Mars settlements, the asteroid mining collectives, the research stations orbiting Jupiter's moons, and the far colonies that had learned through hard experience not to trust anyone from outside. The 3 alien defectors were there too. Kathis, the Drell engineer, had been working with human technicians to reverse engineer Council technology. Not to understand how it worked but to find its weaknesses. Every system has vulnerabilities, Kathis explained, his translator rendering his clicking speech into Korean. The Council's problem is that they've been using the same basic technology for thousands of years. They innovate slowly because they don't need to innovate. They always win through superior numbers and coordination. But that coordination requires standardized systems, added Soyeon, one of Earth's top network security specialists. She'd been working closely with Kathis for weeks. Everything in Council space runs on the same protocols, the same communication standards, the same operating principles. Which means a virus that works on one system will work on all of them, Miho said, suddenly understanding where this was going. Exactly, Soyeon smiled. We've been developing something special. A cascade virus that can spread through Council networks by disguising itself as legitimate traffic. It won't destroy anything, that would be too obvious. Instead, it introduces tiny errors into everything. Navigation calculations become slightly inaccurate. Communication protocols develop random delays. Sensor data becomes just unreliable enough to be useless. Like sand in their gears, Juno said. More like rust, Soyeon corrected. Slow, spreading, and impossible to remove without shutting down everything and starting over. Admiral Kim studied the tactical displays showing Council ship positions. When do we deploy it? Not yet, Ambassador Kim said firmly. We still need to play this carefully. If we refuse to sign, they invade immediately and we fight from a defensive position. We need them to think they've won first. We need their advisors inside our facilities, their equipment integrated with ours. We need them comfortable and careless. You want to let them in? General Taeyong looked incredulous. I want to turn their trap into ours, Kim replied. Every piece of Council equipment they install becomes a vulnerability we can exploit. Every advisor they send becomes a source of intelligence. Every system they connect to ours becomes a pathway for our virus. Miho thought about a conversation he'd had with his father before leaving Korea. They'd been talking about Baduk, the ancient strategy game his father had tried to teach him. Sometimes, his father had said, the strongest position looks like weakness. You let your opponent think they're winning and when they overextend, that's when you strike. It's incredibly risky, Dr. Hannah warned. If they discover what we're doing before we're ready, they'll crush us. They won't, Kim said with certainty. Because they've done this 16 times before and it's worked every time. They're following a script they know by heart. They expect either submission or defiance, cooperation or resistance. They've never encountered a species that could fake submission while preparing to fight. Humans are good at deception, Kathis said quietly. That's what surprised me most when I came here. You lie to each other constantly, for politeness, for advantage, for survival. My people were too honest. We said what we meant and meant what we said. The Council used that against us. So we use our nature as our weapon, Miho said. We tell them what they want to hear. We smile and cooperate and sign their treaty. And while they're congratulating themselves on absorbing another civilization, we're building something they've never seen before. A resistance that looks like compliance, Ambassador Kim said. A trap that looks like surrender. And when the moment comes, we show the Council what happens when you mistake human adaptability for weakness. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would sign the peace accord. They'd welcome the Council's advisors with open arms. And they'd prepare for war. The signing ceremony was broadcast to 600 worlds across the galaxy. Ambassador Kim stood in the Grand Hall of the United Nations, wearing formal diplomatic attire, her expression perfectly composed as she placed humanity's seal on the peace accord. Behind her, representatives from every major human settlement watched in silence. Some understood what was really happening. Most did not. The Xinthian High Mediator's 3 eyes gleamed with what his species considered satisfaction. In council chambers across the galaxy, representatives from 100 different civilizations celebrated. Another species had been brought into the fold. Another potential threat had been neutralized through diplomacy rather than war. It was cleaner this way, more civilized. None of them noticed the microscopic alterations in the document's quantum signature. None of them caught the barely perceptible transmission delay. And absolutely none of them realized that the treaty humanity signed was not quite the same document the Council had proposed. Miho had spent 2 weeks working with the legal team on those changes. They were tiny, almost invisible even to expert analysis. A single word modified here, a comma shifted there, clauses reordered in ways that seemed purely stylistic. But language was Miho's specialty, and he knew that the difference between freedom and slavery could come down to a single misplaced word. The most critical change was in Clause 47, the one that would have given the Council backdoor access to humanity's quantum communication network. The modified version now required unanimous Council approval before activation, and that approval had to be transmitted through channels humanity could monitor and intercept. The 90-day timeline for advisor integration became 90 days following the establishment of mutually agreed protocols, which could be delayed indefinitely through careful bureaucratic maneuvering. "We're going to drown them in paperwork," Admiral Taeyong had said when he first saw the strategy. "Every single implementation will require impact studies, cultural sensitivity assessments, technical compatibility reviews. We'll tie this accord into such a bureaucratic knot it'll take decades to untangle." But the legal tricks were just the surface layer. The real work was happening across human space in ways the Council would never detect. On Mars, the massive terraforming processors that generated breathable atmosphere had been quietly modified. Engineer Daehoon and his team had discovered that the same technology could produce targeted electromagnetic interference on a planetary scale. To any Council sensors, Mars would look completely normal, right up until the moment they needed to communicate or scan the surface. Juno had been reassigned to Europa, where the underwater research stations had transformed into something else entirely. Deep beneath the ice, in caverns carved by thermal vents, humanity was building a new generation of ships. They were small, fast, and designed with stealth technology that Council sensors weren't configured to detect. The Council had spent thousands of years developing sensors to find large fleet movements and conventional military vessels. Nobody had taught them to look for something as small and quiet as a mosquito. In the asteroid belt, the mining operations had shifted focus. Miners like old Hyunwoo, who'd spent 40 years pulling minerals from rocks, were now extracting specific isotopes that had no commercial value but could be weaponized in ways Council technology couldn't detect. The isotopes would sit in the cargo holds, looking like industrial waste until the day they were needed. And on Earth, in laboratories hidden beneath innocuous corporate buildings, Dr. Soyen's team was perfecting their masterpiece. The Cascade virus had evolved beyond anything the Council could anticipate. It was patient, intelligent, and nearly invisible. It could spread through Council networks by perfectly mimicking legitimate traffic patterns, waiting dormant for months or even years before activation. The beauty of it, Soyeon explained to Miho during one of his visits to the lab, is that it doesn't destroy anything. Destruction is crude and it's easily detected. Instead, our virus just makes everything slightly worse. Navigation calculations develop a 0.001% error rate. Communication protocols experience random latency spikes lasting microseconds. Sensor calibrations drift by fractions of a degree. Individually, these errors are so small they look like normal system aging. But combined across an entire fleet? Across an entire civilization's infrastructure? Chaos, Miho said quietly. Controlled chaos, Soyeon corrected. We can adjust the severity, target specific systems, or even reverse the effects entirely. It's not a weapon meant to destroy the Council. It's leverage. A way to show them we're not as helpless as they think. 3 months after the signing, the Council advisors arrived. They came in small groups, professional and courteous, with ready smiles and helpful suggestions. They set up offices in government buildings across Earth and throughout the colonies. They attended meetings, offered expertise, and began the slow process of integrating themselves into humanity's command structures. What they didn't know was that every office had been modified. Every communication device they installed had been quietly cloned, allowing human intelligence to intercept every message. Every piece of Council equipment that connected to human networks was being mapped, analyzed, and prepared for eventual compromise. Advisor Zelkith, assigned to the Lunar Command Center, seemed particularly pleased with how cooperative humans were being. He filed regular reports back to Council headquarters, noting that integration was proceeding ahead of schedule. Humans were eager to learn, quick to adapt, and showed appropriate deference to Council expertise. He never noticed Lieutenant Juno in the observation room above, recording every keystroke, every communication, every system access. He never suspected that the helpful young translator Miho, who brought him tea and asked intelligent questions about council procedures, was actually an intelligence operative memorizing every security protocol and system vulnerability. The council advisors saw exactly what they expected to see: a younger species grateful for guidance, eager to join the galactic community, and slightly overwhelmed by the complexity of integration. They'd seen it 16 times before. The pattern was always the same. But patterns can be traps. And humans had spent their entire history learning how to trap things larger and stronger than themselves. Admiral Kim stood in the deep underground command center that officially didn't exist, watching status reports flow in from across human space. The Mars atmospheric processors were ready. The Europa stealth fleet was 90% complete. The asteroid mining operations had stockpiled enough weaponized isotopes to supply a war lasting years. And Soyan's virus was loaded and waiting, hidden in thousands of innocent-looking system updates that council advisors had personally approved. "They think they've won," General Taeyong said, standing beside her. "Let them think that a little longer," Kim replied. "Every day they believe the lie is another day we get stronger. Another day we learn their systems, study their tactics, and prepare our response." Ambassador Kim joined them, looking tired but satisfied. The Council High Command has scheduled Integration Day for exactly 1 year after signing. They'll activate their control protocols, take command of our military systems, and present us with a choice: accept full integration peacefully, or watch our defenses collapse. "They're going to be very surprised," Admiral Kim said with a cold smile. "Surprised is an understatement," Ambassador Kim replied. "They're about to learn that underestimating humanity was the biggest mistake they've ever made." Integration Day arrived exactly 1 year after the signing. In government buildings across Earth and throughout the colonies, council advisors sat at their stations waiting for the signal. Council fleets had quietly positioned themselves at the edges of human space over the past weeks, close enough to jump in within minutes. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. The council had done this 16 times before. They knew exactly how it would unfold. At precisely 0800 Universal Coordinated Time, the advisors would receive their activation codes. The backdoor protocols hidden in their equipment would activate. Human military systems would freeze, and command authority would transfer to council control. A few hours of confusion, maybe some protests, and then humanity would accept the inevitable. They always did. Advisor Zelkith sat in his office at Lunar Command, feeling satisfied with a job well done. The humans had been so cooperative, so eager to learn. He'd filed glowing reports about their integration progress. In a few minutes, his real work would begin, helping guide humanity through the difficult transition from independence to proper membership in the galactic community. It was for their own good, really. His console chimed. The activation code appeared on his screen. He entered the command sequence, watching as the override protocols initialized. Around the world, 100 other advisors did the same thing at the exact same moment. Thousands of pieces of council equipment hummed to life, sending their takeover signals through human networks. Nothing happened. Zelkith frowned and ran a diagnostic. His equipment showed all systems active and functioning. The override signals were transmitting perfectly. But there was no response from human military networks. No system lockouts. No authority transfers. Nothing. In the deep command center beneath the Swiss Alps, Miho watched the council's attack play out on the massive tactical displays. Every override attempt was being caught and quarantined in real time. Every backdoor was already sealed. Every piece of supposedly secure council equipment was now broadcasting its complete operational data directly to human intelligence. "They're confused," Lieutenant Juno reported from his station, monitoring intercepted council communications. "The advisors are running diagnostics. They're reporting system failures to their command. They're starting to panic." Admiral Kim stood at the center of the room, calm and focused. "Show them why it failed." Across human space, the response was synchronized to the millisecond. It was like watching a symphony, each section coming in at exactly the right moment. On Mars, Daehoon activated the modified atmospheric processors. Electromagnetic pulses blanked council sensors across 3 entire sectors. To the council ships waiting at Mars orbit, the planet simply disappeared from their scopes. They were flying blind, unable to see the defensive platforms that were now targeting them. From Europa's hidden shipyards, the stealth fleet deployed. Juno's brother Minseek commanded the lead squadron, and he smiled as his ships cycled in and out of council detection range. The council sensors would catch a flicker, start to lock on, and then lose contact as the ship's phase shifted. It was like trying to swat shadows. Throughout the asteroid belt, the mining platforms came alive. What the council had dismissed as commercial operations revealed their true nature. Thousands of distributed weapons nodes, each one small enough to ignore individually, but capable of reconfiguring into whatever formation the tactical situation required. Old Hyunwoo, who'd pretended to be just another miner, was actually coordinating a network of mobile artillery platforms. But the real weapon was invisible. In her lab beneath Seoul, Dr. Soyeon's hand hovered over the activation command. She looked at Ambassador Kim, who stood beside her. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Ambassador Kim asked quietly. "Once we deploy the virus, there's no going back. The council will never trust us again." "Jaiwan," Soyeon replied, using the ambassador's first name, "they never trusted us to begin with. They just saw us as the next civilization to absorb. Another species too naive to see the trap." Ambassador Kim nodded slowly. "Do it." Soyeon pressed the command. The Cascade virus spread through council networks like a wildfire through dry grass, jumping from system to system through the very equipment the advisors had installed. It didn't announce itself with dramatic system crashes or obvious sabotage. That would have been too crude, too easy to contain. Instead, it did exactly what Soyeon had designed it to do. Navigation calculations became unreliable. Communication channels developed interference. Targeting computers lost precision. Life support systems started giving false readings. Nothing failed completely, but nothing worked quite right either. And because the council had standardized everything across thousands of worlds for efficiency, there was no way to contain it without shutting down their entire civilization's infrastructure. In council headquarters, 3 systems away, alarms were screaming. The Xinthian High Mediator's 3 eyes widened in horror as report after report flooded in. Fleet coordination was falling apart. Planetary defense grids were going offline. Even basic communication between council worlds was becoming unreliable. His communication console finally connected to Earth, the image flickering and distorted. Ambassador Kim's face appeared, calm and composed. "You have committed an act of war against the Galactic Council," the Xinthian said, his melodic voice harsh with anger. "No," Kim replied evenly. "We defended ourselves against attempted subjugation. Your peace accord was never about peace. It was a trap, carefully designed to strip away our independence and absorb us into your empire. You've done it to 16 other species. You thought you could do it to us." She leaned forward slightly. "But humanity has survived worse than you. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and each other. We learned a long time ago that peace is often just the quiet before the storm. So when you came offering friendship after 30 years of hostility, we didn't celebrate. We prepared." "You cannot win," the Xinthian said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. And every single one of them is now flying blind," Kim interrupted. "The virus in your systems has a kill switch. We can remove it. Your infrastructure can return to normal. Your fleets can regain coordination. Your civilization can function again. But first, you will meet our terms." The Xinthian's eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of stress in his species. "What terms?" "Withdraw all advisors from human space immediately. Acknowledge humanity's complete sovereignty. Open your classified archives and reveal what you did to the 16 species that came before us. And negotiate a real peace accord, one between equals, not between predator and prey." The communication ended. For 3 days, humanity waited while the council tried desperately to find a way around the virus. Their best technicians worked around the clock. They attempted system purges, network isolations, complete rebuilds from backup. Nothing worked. The virus was too sophisticated, too deeply embedded, and too patient. On the 4th day, the Xinthian's face appeared on screens across human space. His 3 eyes no longer gleamed with superiority. "We agree to your terms." In the command center, a cheer went up. Miho felt Juno's hand on his shoulder, both of them grinning. They'd done it. Humanity had survived. Ambassador Kim allowed herself a small smile. Around her, generals and scientists embraced, some crying with relief. They gambled everything on this plan and it had worked. "What happens now?" Miho asked. "Now we negotiate a real peace," Kim replied. "One where both sides respect each other's strength. The Council has learned that humanity isn't prey to be absorbed. We're a power to be respected." Dr. Hannah joined them, looking exhausted but triumphant. "The other 16 species, the ones the Council absorbed. They're sending us messages. They want to know how we did it." "Then we'll teach them," Kim said. "We'll show them that it's never too late to reclaim your freedom." The Council thought their trap was perfect. But they forgot something important. "What's that?" asked General Taeyang. Kim looked around at the faces surrounding her, people from Earth, Mars, the Belt, the outer colonies. People who'd risked everything to preserve humanity's independence. They forgot that humans don't just survive traps. We study them. We understand them. And then we turn them into weapons. The peace accord had been a trap. But humanity had sensed it coming, prepared for it, and built something stronger in response. The galaxy would learn that the newest species on the stage was not another victim to be manipulated. They were survivors who'd earned their place through cunning, preparation, and the stubborn refusal to accept someone else's definition of peace.